And yesterday I was impressed to find out 7 states never had a stay-at-home order. Iowa was one of them. South Carolina was one of them. Then Idaho, North and South Dakota, and Nebraska, Iowa,
In Idaho.
Idaho, South Carolina, and West Virginia. West Virginia. They never had a stay-at-home order. So I think Vanjie and Nancy went a little bit overboard. The only time Nancy and Kenny came in my house since the end of February was the day I didn't answer the phone. And it got to be 10:30 and I didn't call and check in. I'm supposed to call in at 8, and I'm supposed to call Vanjie before 9. 8:30, call Nancy. 9, call Vanjie. And one day, the only morning after I spent the night puking, for the only time during a chemo, one day I was late calling in. And I think Nancy was curious enough to see if I was dead or alive. When she found out I was breathing, they took off. Didn't even stop for their empty beer cans.
Tell me again how it was when she woke you up.
I was sound asleep in my bed. My bed is naked on both sides. The head of it was against the wall. Okay? I get in and out the side where the bathroom was. The left side. She's on the right side. And she's standing there with her face above my head. Kate, wake up. Kate, wake up. I sleep heavy sometimes, and sometimes I'm awake the minute you walk in the room. But I was sleeping heavy because I hadn't been back to bed till around 4 or so, because I had to clean up all that puke mess. Anyhow, I had showered, put on clean night clothes, was in position with my feet up, sound asleep. She's leaning over me. Finally, I start waking up at register, and I sat up in bed. I can still do sit-ups. I sat up in bed and said, "What the fuck do you want?" And then I said, "Oh my God, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that to you." She looked at the doorway. She said, "Come on, Kenny, she's alive." And they left. She was going out the door. She took off her leather glove. She had a rubber glove on to touch my doorknob. When I realized what time it was, I called Vanjie and apologized. And I said, "But I'm happy. Last night, I felt hiccupy and nauseated. And for the first time since they diagnosed cancer, I puked." And I said, "I shouldn't have." After I came home at 11:30 in the morning, the only thing I drank was a small glass, that little glass I used for Coke, a small glass of warm 7-Up. And I said, got to be late. I got to feeling hungry. So I pulled out from the freezer cream of chicken soup that had extra milk in it to make it watery. And I ate a small bowl of soup. And I burped a couple of times. And washed up, soaked my teeth, do what I do, went to bed. 2 o'clock in the morning, I felt like somebody just took a rusty spoon or something and shoved it in the side of my lower abdomen. It just this real sharp pain. And I went, puked all over myself, my nightgown, my hair, my bed, my pillow, my sheets. Got out of bed, puke landed on the rug and the throw rug. Staggered into the bathroom, puked on the wall by the toilet. Some of it went in the toilet, some of it went on the floor, some of it went on my feet. More puke than could have been from a goddamn bowl of soup. That was the night after my last MRI. I cleaned up the bathroom first. And I took a couple of cold wet towels and cleaned up the puke on the rugs. And then I wadded up my sheets and took them in the shower and shook them out, rinsed the lumps out, threw them over the shower rod, washed out my blanket, rinsed that out as good as I could, wrung it out as good as I could, and leaned it over a chair back, put the chair in my kitchen and let it drip on the kitchen floor, which was alone. And it was 4 or past 4 when I was clean. The mess was cleaned up. There was clean sheets on the bed, clean nightgown on me, clean underpants. When I was clean, I went back to bed. And I passed out. I slept real heavy. Usually I wake up between 2 and 3 and between 4 and 6 every morning and go in the bathroom and pee. That's what I do. I take water pills, so I pee a lot, okay? Well, I never woke up between 2 o'clock and 11 o'clock. I slept all that time, which I have done before. I have slept that long a time at once without waking up. But I was supposed to call Nancy at 8:30 and check in, and I didn't call her. And by 9 o'clock, I was supposed to call Vanjie, and I didn't wake up, and I didn't call her. So they got on the phone back and forth with each other. They both tried punching my number in. My phone was on the table in the dining area of the living room, plugged in to that wall with a charger this long. So the phone was actually sitting on the corner of the table. I never heard the phone. I slept through it. I sleep through the phone when it's in my pocket sometimes, but I slept through it. Well, I went in the bathroom, got myself together, put on a pot of coffee, and before a cup dripped into the coffee pot, I was on the phone apologizing to Nancy. And I said, I'm sorry. I said, last night, I woke up in the middle of the night and puked all over. And that's the only time I puked since they told me I had cancer, which was December of 2017. Now this is 2020, right?
Yeah.
I was glad I could throw up. You don't want that rotten stuff rolling around in your cancerous gut. You want it out. And I said, I am so sorry, Nancy. And I said, I didn't want to upset you. And I said, I know when you came over, you probably thought you'd find me dead. And I apologize for that. I couldn't help it. I fell asleep. I didn't hear the phone. I didn't wake up until you called my name, and that woke me up. And I said, I'm so sorry. She says, well, Kenny's pissed. I said, well, I'm sorry. I said, is there anything I can do? No, go back to bed. Okay. I better call Vanjie instead. So I called Vanjie, and I apologized to her profusely. I must have said I'm sorry 50 times. And she said, I'm coming to get you. I said, Vanjie, it's Thursday afternoon, Thursday morning. I said, can I stay here by myself? I'll check in until Monday. Monday at 8 o'clock, I'm expecting you to pick me up to take me to the hospital. I'm supposed to have a chemo treatment. I'm supposed to have lab work done. All right. They were mad at me. And I didn't have any control, Robert.
Yeah.
Well, later on, the lady from across the hall, Joanne, you met her, I think.
Yeah.
You gave her some sugar. She knocked on my door. She said, Kay, it's Joanne. Your door's not locked. And I poked my head in. I said, sure, I'm just sitting here. She said, is there anything I can do for you? I said, she said, what the hell happened? I said, I had a bad reaction to a miserable MRI. And I woke up in the night and I threw up. She said, I'm so glad you threw up. You've been wanting to do that for months. She was happy for me that
Yeah.
I did. She said, you want me to come in and clean up the mess? I said, it's cleaned up. I said, I got my sheets hanging over the shower rod, but they'll dry enough to go take down and throw them in the washer. She said, you want me to do some laundry for you? I said, no. As long as I can do it, let me do it. She says, you got something to eat? I said, oh yeah. I even got cream of chicken soup left. We laughed together. She gave me a hug. She said, I'm going to leave my door open, and you leave your door open. And if you should get dizzy and fall, or you have to puke again or something, just holler as loud as you can. Or if you need me, just holler. I said, thank you, Joanne. A real nice lady.
Yeah.
Well, that was Thursday. Friday, I picked up all the shit in the house I could, and I sorted 4 baskets of laundry. Boxes or bags or shopping bags, but 1 basket and the rest was in whatever. And I washed shit I hadn't washed in a month, like hot pad holders and stuff. I washed everything. Doilies, placemats, the whole 9 yards. Dresser scarves, little throw rugs, and every time I went down to the end of the hall, I thought, I'll never use this again. I'm not dragging it to Vanishers. And I'd set it on the table in the hall. Books, magazines, calendars, a whole coffee cup full of pencils and ballpoints, shit like that. And when you do 4 loads and it's in the washing machine for less than a half hour and it's in the dryer for an hour, you do a lot of walking back and forth.
Yeah.
So I got my exercise in. One of the trips down, I took up my garbage to the end of the hall, took it down the elevator, went outside, threw it in the dumpster, came in a different door, walked through the hall. So I got 2-3 miles of walking in the hall. I felt good. All my clothes were clean. My belly didn't hurt. I knew I could puke. And I knew I was in the books with the siblings, but Connie called and she said, "Is there anything I can do for you?" I said, "No, but if you're in Waterloo, stop by and I'll put on a pot of coffee." Okay. Brian called. He said, "Are you okay, Kate?" I said, "Yeah. As long as I can do it myself, I'm fine." He said, "You want me to stop and bring you some food?" I said, "I got food." It's okay. That's from Des Moines. That's not next door. Tom called from Seattle. Matt was on the extension. So we had a 3-way phone conversation. He said, "I can call a hospice in Waterloo and have somebody come and take care of you." I said, "Tom, I can feed myself. I can do my dishes. I can go to the bathroom alone. I can even wipe my ass by myself. I can take a shower. I can walk the hall, and I got 3 books I never read." I said, "I'm all set up for the next couple of days. What can I do for you?" I said, "Nothing." He sent me $100 bills in 20s. And he said, "You know where it goes." Because I told him, he's trying to pay me back what I gave him when he was in college, and I told him to forget about it. And he said, "I got more money than I know what the hell to do with right now." He said, "I got all the vehicles I want." Hi, gorgeous.
Hello.
My neck isn't long enough. Culottes? They're adorable. I like your bottoms.
Thank you. They're Jaden's.
I like your top, too.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We used to call them peasant blouses, and we'd take a pillowcase and cut the top as low as we wanted it or as straight as we wanted it, and then take a ballpoint and mark off the sleeves. And if we were small enough, we could just cut sleeve holes. And if we were bigger, we'd have to take some scraps and make sleeves, sometimes out of lace. And then we'd gather them and sew them. And when we were going to get a suntan, we'd roll the tops up, pull the straps, the sides down. And we thought we were so glamorous. And then we made cotton gathered skirts. You'd take a piece of fabric and rip it that big, and another one this big, and another one that big. And you gather them, and you sew them in tiers. We called them three-tiered skirts. They were the tops were usually solid colors, and the bottoms were usually print. My sister and I, my older sister, she could cut out the patterns and I could sew them up. Excuse me. And we'd put on our ballerina slippers. And we'd go to dances. And we thought we were so glamorous. And the fuller the skirt, the more slips you put under it. We used to have slips made out of something called crinoline. It was real stiff, meshy stuff. And then half slips made out of layers and layers of that nylon mesh, like they make those things you take a shower with. Imagine a slip with 3 layers of that stuff. Our skirts stuck out like this. But underneath it all, you had to have a straight skirt. Otherwise, by the time you got home, your legs were all little scratches. We did a dance called the Jitterbug. And then rock and roll was invented. Boy, we were really classy then. Dumb shits.
Tell her about when you saw Elvis.
What?
Tell her about when you saw Elvis.
Elvis?
Yeah.
There's this big auditorium in La Crosse, Wisconsin, which was about 40 miles from the town we lived in. And he was opening, he was unknown. He was opening for, I think, Johnny Cash and the Carter sisters, which Johnny Cash's wife was a Carter. So it was a rock and roll show. Somehow I tricked Pat into working that night. I think it was a Friday night. And me and my thumb went out on the highway. And some idiot gave me a ride to La Crosse. And I think it was $5 or less to get in.
I wish.
And we sat in this auditorium, made like a high school gym, and my seat was way up on the top of the bleachers. But when Johnny Cash came on, and everybody's getting real excited, he's the big mainliner, he's the headliner. Me and my girlfriend, Betty Link, we went downstairs, sneaked under the bleachers, found the door, and Elvis and 5 other guys were taking instruments out through the parking lot and putting them in a van. And when Elvis went past me, I touched his arm. He just ignored me, but I touched his arm. And then when he got famous, I bragged like if it was something really important. I got to touch Elvis Presley at the Mary E. Sawyer Auditorium in La Crosse, Wisconsin, back in 1953.
Boy, oh boy.
Then after that, there was this MC that would get different venues and present them at night on television, about 10 o'clock at night. And he had Elvis Presley on TV. So Joanne Ellens was a girl that lived down the highway from me on a farm. She took a picture with her Polaroid camera where the film comes out. She took about 10 pictures, but finally she got one picture where you could see on a black and white Elvis Presley doing this. She brought that to school and she showed it off to everybody, and I said, I got to touch him. Oh, McKenna, you're just making that up. No, I got to touch him with this hand. Some of the people believe me, some of them didn't. But back in the 50s, to come up with $5 for the cheapest ticket meant we used to babysit back then for people with 4 or 5 kids. Take the bus to their house after school. Get off of the bus. Help the mother finish making supper. Well, then she went and got ready to go out. Then the dad would come home from work. He'd get ready to go out. Feed the kids. Do the dishes. Give 5 kids a bath. Read 5 or 10 stories till you got them in bed. Go finish cleaning up the kitchen. Straighten up the rest of the house. And if you were very, very, very lucky, all the kids would fall asleep. Be quiet. You could turn on the radio real low. Or if you were blessed by God, they had a TV, black and white TV about this big. You could turn that with the volume real low and sit there by the TV and listen for the kids to wake up. And if the kids woke up, you took care of the kids. You didn't bother watching the program. Quite often the next day, parents didn't get home before noon. So you got the kids up, got them dressed, got them fed, made their beds, cleaned up their rooms for 50 cents. So to get $5 together took a long time and a lot of saving. And anytime my brother, who was younger than me, about 1.5 years, 2 years younger than me, anytime he saw any money, it became his. And my older sister, who was the smartest and the prettiest and the boss in the house, she assumed she could go through everything. It didn't take him long to find my hiding spots. So I learned, you put it in your sock, and wear your socks to bed. If your socks are stretched out or loose, you wear your shoes to bed with your socks. That's where you hid your money. But I had a great life. I learned how to hide money. I learned how to be sneaky with things I wanted to keep. And I learned to, it's called KYA, cover your ass. Protect yourself first. But it was a great life. I had so many, many, many wonderful memories. Just, you name something, and I got a memory about it. Remember when you were real little, and I think you and Jaden and Demetria came to Texas? That was fun. Did we go down to Galveston by the ocean water?
Yeah, we did. The only thing that I really remember from that trip was we all got lice.
Yeah.
And we all sat in a line and we combed each other out. And I remember Galveston.
That was the time the big girls were there too.
Yeah, I remember that time.
And I got these lice combs that had real fine teeth and this stinky stuff. And Jaden combed your hair. Juliana combed Jaden's hair. Gianna combed Julie's hair, and I combed Juliana's hair. And then we shampooed, and I think we went out to a restaurant to eat supper, because we were in a motel. And after supper, we did it all over again. And then, where did we stop? Somebody needed socks or something. We stopped at a Walmart. And someplace in Arkansas, maybe Benton. We stopped at a Walmart on the way home. And they had a contraption you could buy that you plugged in. And the end of it was like a comb, and you started at the front, and you combed through every strand of hair, and then you cleaned it, and you did the next person. And then when the second person was cleaned, then you'd go back and do the first person over again. And then, like a bunch of monkeys, we were all looking at each other's heads. And when we couldn't find any of those little white specks that look like the size of pepper, they're called the nits, that's the eggs. When we couldn't find any of them on anybody, I said, now we can go home. But it took us maybe 3 days to get from Texas here. Because I said, I'm not taking your kids home with lice. Your dad will shoot me. But I think Julie had pretty long, thick, blonde hair. And I think she got it at school. And then we all got it. One morning in the bed in Arkansas, we had 2 double beds. Sometimes I'd hear an argument. You gotta sleep with Nyama tonight. She snores. I'd say, whoever wants to be stuck with me, I'm ready to go to bed. And you'd sleep, usually 3 in a bed and 1 with me. But one morning we got up, and the motel we were in had breakfast. But the breakfast didn't start till like 8 o'clock. And we were all up and dressed by then. And the breakfast place still wasn't open. So I said, I'm going to go in and straighten up the bathroom and make sure we're not leaving anything and pack. So I'm in the bathroom, and I open the door. 2 of us on one bed, 2 of us on the other bed, holding hands, jumping up and down, and singing. I just put my head back in the bathroom, pretend I didn't see it, because I didn't want to holler at you. But that's how I remember that trip. You probably remember it different.
I don't remember much.
One of those motels we went in, God bless you. God bless you. God bless you.
Thank you.
One of those motels we went in, we stopped at the pop machine, got some stuff to stick in the little refrigerator, and we opened it up, and there was those bottles of, like, cherry wine, the cheap bottles of wine stuff. And after your kids were asleep, I drank 2 of them. I think one was root beer flavored and one was grape flavored or something. And I thought, but in the morning I said, don't drink that pop, drink the cans of pop. Because I thought, I didn't want to let one of your kids drink alcohol. But I don't think those things were out very long. But they were like bottles of pop, but it had booze in it. Somebody must have used that room and forgot them and left. And whoever cleaned didn't clean the refrigerator. Oh well. Was that the time we stopped at that big truck stop at the farmer's market? And we got a whole sack of peaches? And everybody had peach juice all over their shirts? You loved peaches when you were little.
She still does.
Pretty good. Haven't had any
I
fresh
still
ones
do.
for a while.
What?
Haven't had any fresh ones for a long time.
Next time you go to town, remind me to give you some extra money and see if they got them. It's a little early, but I got grapefruit from Guatemala in February. So there might have some imported. And if they do, wash the peelings and don't eat the peelings. Because you don't know how they handle them. And quite often, food coming from foreign countries isn't inspected as much as stuff produced in this country. And quite often, the people who pick fruits and vegetables have to work fast, have to get it packaged up, have to get it shipped to this country, have to get it unpackaged, and in the process, it doesn't get washed. And some of them get paid at night from spending early in the till till it gets dark working in the fields. So if they have to go potty, they do it in the field. That's how it is. So that's where an illness called E. coli comes from. Human waste that's been ingested, that's been eaten. And you don't see it. You can't see if a rabbit peed on your lettuce. You know. And once it rains and the sun comes out, if somebody pooped on your lettuce, it gets washed away, most of it. But, so, especially from foreign countries, wash it well. But you don't have to wash the ice cream from Canada. Canada makes ice cream with in the French part of Canada, Quebec, with a higher butter content than American ice cream. And just a tablespoon will do you, because it's so rich. You know, it's got more butter fat in it. And a lot of the stuff you buy now is processed, dried milk, reconstituted, that means water added, with artificial color and artificial flavor, and whipped with air in it, and packed in containers, and it's called ice cream dessert, or, you know, frozen vanilla flavored dessert. You don't want to eat that if you don't have to. You're better off to buy that much real ice cream than that much reconstituted, artificial flavored, machine packed. You know, some of that stuff is just nasty. But since you kids were born, you always ate very healthy. Unless you had a babysitter that took you to McDonald's for Happy Meals. but you always ate healthy. Your parents thought of that. And your mom could give you a bath and look at your skin and your eyes and your ears, and she would know if you needed more vitamin C because it was cold time to catch cold, or you've been in the house for 2 weeks without being able to go out in the sun because it's cold and windy and maybe you don't feel good or you got a lot of homework. She knew to give you vitamin D. She knew what to give you. And Dad will tell you, you kids were probably the healthiest kids in Champaign County. And you weren't dragged off to the doctor every time you went, or, your mom knew how to take care of you. And if she didn't know, she'd buy another book and find out how, right?
Yep.
You couldn't have got a better mother. If you ordered her from heaven, and I know all your life she's been looking out for you. She's like a special angel at God's side looking out for you. And I don't know if you believe in God or angels, but that's what I believe.
That's how I've always thought of it.
And any of your siblings or you, I think you're upset or troubled or hurt or confused or drunk, I say a prayer to your mom. Sometimes mentally. I don't always, but I talk to your mom a lot. And the way I believe, with any luck, next month by this time, we'll be up in heaven together watching you. It's in God's hands when he wants me, but there's something I gotta do yet. I don't know what it is. But he's been stalling around for so long. He's in no hurry to get me. And I think about 6 hours after I get up there, somebody's going to say, "Shut up!" Because I talk too much. That's from living alone so long and not even able to talk to your next door neighbor, being in lockdown. It's so depressing. It's so upsetting. It makes you so confused because you think, how can I get out of here? And you think, why am I here? And you think, there are things I could have done different in my life. There were times I could have been nicer, or times I had $20 and I only needed $5, and somebody else was broke. I could have gave them the money, There were times when that happened. In 78 years, a lot of times when you could have done something different. But I had a totally, totally, totally awesome life. And there's probably less than 5 things that I would change if I could. I could have been kinder, could have been more accepting, I could have been humbler, could have been more generous. But Robert will tell you, all his life, if I had anything, this beautiful dress, if I had anything, and you told me you wanted it, I'd just give it to you. There was probably 5 things I wouldn't just give you. My wedding ring was one, but most of the things I might have to think about it before I gave it to you. You know, but didn't I have a good life?
You did. I'm glad I'm glad for all the things that you've done for me and my family and what you've done for other people.
Well, I need to get the attitude of gratitude and spread it around. There's times when you don't even think to say thank you when someone tops your coffee. Whether it's at home or in a restaurant. You don't even think to say thank you. You take it for granted. And there's times somebody's standing in a doorway holding the door open for you to go in a store. You forget to say, thank you, I appreciate that. You take it for granted. And there's times when somebody stops by, you don't say thank you for coming to see me enough. And I thought it was nice of Gabby to come twice. Once with her whole family and once with Layla. And I thought it was excellent of Lacey to bring the kids by. Last time I saw them was one time two or three, maybe 4 years ago, in the Champaign Park. A bunch of us met up at the park in Champaign.
I think it was 2017.
What?
I think it was 2017. So that was 3 years ago.
Well, Layla could walk, and Frankie was just walking good. And he crawled up on, I was on somebody's chase lounge with my feet up and resting. He crawled up on me, and I have this thing, it's called a port. It's a firm thing that the nurses can poke a needle in for IVs. That's implanted in this blood vein. It's in a tube. It's called a port. He was on my chest and he banged his little hard head back. I got tears in my eyes, but I didn't say nothing. When I took off my clothes, it had slid down about this much. Oh, shit. So I called the hospital and I asked to talk to my doctor, and my doctor wasn't there. So I said, take this detailed message for him. I said, I was reclined, and a toddler thunked his head against my port, and it's moved a little bit more than an inch, straight down. And she said, can you feel it? And I said, yeah. And she said, can you move the tube in your vein? I said, a little bit. She said, as soon as you get back to Waterloo, stop in urgent care, it's emergency room, or go right to the hospital or come to the clinic. We'll look at it. So Dr. G looked at it and he said, that's fine. He said, does it hurt? I said, no. He said, it doesn't hurt? I said, no. He said, don't you ever get any pain? I said, I don't want any. We laughed together and that was the end of it. But since they stopped putting an IV in it every other week, it sticks out a little further. I can see it and I can feel it. And so that's why I say, right shoulder hug. If you put your right shoulder against my right shoulder, we can both give a hug. But Lamont came at me straight on and I said, no, my port's moved. What? Just hit my right shoulder. Okay. But he's a big guy. I thought, if he smashes me, I don't want to go to a strange emergency room and have him put me under, send me to a surgery, take the damn thing out, and hope I don't bleed to death. Because it goes right up my carotid artery. So, you know what you're doing, God. I don't know what he's doing, but he knows what he's doing. I am so grateful to be here. It's so beautiful to get a hug from you, or your dad, or whoever stops by. The last person I was in contact with before I came here was my sister Vanjie. And she kept 6 to 8 feet between us with gloves and a mask. And I'm 10 years older than she is. She's my little sister. I potty trained that kid. I spoon fed her. I diapered her. I walked the floor when she was crabby. I made her sugar titties. Do you remember them? You take a piece of thin fabric like this, you cut it in a square, and you take a tablespoon of, or teaspoon of white sugar, stick it in the middle, pull the sides up, wrap a string around it, tie the string in a knot, and hold it for a pretend pacifier when you have nothing to feed a baby. Teresa, Vanjie, Tom, Jerry. I fed all of those kids sugar titties because we didn't have milk or formula in the house. I left home when my...
That's your phone.
I didn't hear it. Hello? Hello? Wait a minute. It's a 217 number, but I didn't get the rest of it.
Hello?
Did it turn black?
Yeah.
It's a telesolicitor.
Oh,
What?
It's an 847 number. It's an 847 number. 847 is Chicago. You can call them back if you want.
I get calls from 847 to tell me the extended warranty on my Buick is about to be up. I get calls telling them that if you are over 50, push 1. Now is the time to prepare for Social Security. We can send a licensed agent to your home at your convenience to write you up an insurance policy. Are you retired? If you're retired, do you have competent adults living with you? If not, push 2. Push 2 to see who the hell it is. Thank you for answering the phone. This is Mariella Johnson. I can give you, if you sign up for the next 24 hours, I can give you a free alert button for 30 days. Then after that, if you have a credit card, we can directly withdraw the fee out of your credit card account. It's free for 30 days. How much is it after that? Well, I don't have my chart in front of me. I'd have to see where you're located. You called me, don't you know where the hell I live? Don't speak to me like that, Bam. Because they call from all over the world. And sometimes you answer the phone, and it'll be this time of the day. Ooh, good evening. Are you having a nice day today? Yeah. We're having glorious weather. Praise God. Your name has come up on our Bible list. We can send you, free of charge, a small pocket Bible. Or we can send you a catalog with our larger Bibles. All you have to do is pay for shipping and handling and a small carrying fee. How much does that come to? $23.47 for a pocket Bible. Then the guy pauses to get your name and address. And you say, "Excuse me, sir, where are you calling from?" "I'm calling from Poland." "Oh, how's the weather there?" "I'm right outside of Warsaw, and the weather's beautiful. 7 o'clock at night in Iowa. I don't think I need a Polish guy to send me a pocket Bible after everything's done for about $30, when I can get one at church by asking for it free. You know. And then the best one. Congratulations. You are my 50th call. You have won a 3-day cruise to the Bahamas. We have reservations for you in Florida. You'll have to pay your motel, your transportation to Florida, all taxes, tips, and gratuities, and all of your liquid beverages on the ship. But it's a 3-day cruise and it's free. And for $1,999.99, you can bring a second guest. But he'll have to pay for any food or any entertainment on the ship. It leaves next Thursday out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Okay, I'm in the middle of a snowstorm in Iowa. I can't drive. You come and get me? Bam, they hang up. But if you got a good credit rating, they try to sell you the strangest stuff. Especially when 6 months in a row your balance is zero. You know, you paid it off. Oh my God.
Yeah, mine just went up. My credit score just went back up to 812.
Wow, that's excellent. Mine's down to 700 and something.
Yeah.
Probably go down to 400 after I missed 3 credit card payments because I didn't get the mail. Oh well. But I think I could still co-sign if you want to buy a new car. Put it in.
Buy one for Laura.
Okay.
We should go look at that book.
A co-signer is the person who has to pay your bill if you quit paying it for any reason. Because I made the mistake of co-signing for Jonah. for that little white car, the car he wanted. And when I'd coincide for Josh, he'd pay me back. And sometimes he'd give me extra $20 or $50 or something. He'd say, I appreciate you co-signing for me. You know. But I remember being that young and that irresponsible. Can you imagine? Can you imagine walking away from a pregnant mother and an abusive father and 6 or 7 kids younger than you? Walking away, finding a job, and sending money home? I felt terrible. I didn't want to leave my ma. I felt sorry for her. I was afraid of my dad. And I knew Mike and Colleen, Michelle and Colleen, wouldn't be able to cope very long. They were too high-strung. I knew it wouldn't, a diploma or something, they'd be gone. But living at my grandma's house, and my grandma was probably 5 years younger than I am now. Maybe older. Pat was her first grandchild. And Pat was born when my grandma was 50. And I was her third grandchild. So.
And then she lived another 50 years.
What?
Then Grandma Smearod lived another 50 years.
Oh, yeah.
And do you remember how many offspring she had in that 50 years?
How many children?
Children, grandchildren, and great-children. How many were there altogether?
She had...
I thought at that one family reunion it was over 300, was it?
She had 12 natural children. A couple of them acquired stepchildren when they got married. I think 2 of them did. All of her children, except Sarah, one, her oldest daughter, had offspring. My mother had the largest family. My mother had 18 pregnancies. She lost an infant shortly after birth, and she had a tubal pregnancy that they had to do surgery on to bring out. Or if it ruptured, it would have killed her. She had the largest family. The one with the smallest family Alfred and Clara Louise each only had 4 kids. Everybody else had between 4 and 16. When I was pregnant with Diana, who would have been a great-grandchild, and she already had a couple from Pat, she had 72 natural grandchildren. I think, we'll take a couple phone calls, but I think you and Diana have at least one, maybe more, kids that would have been my cousins. Clara's daughter was born after Diana was. And I think Gary Smearwood, Wimpy's boy, I think he's younger than Diana. And I think I think one of Rosemary's kids had twins that disappeared. Now, somebody else's baby was put up for adoption. But I know she had 72 or more. Just plain grandkids. I have 10. And I don't think anyone knows how many great-grandchildren or great-great-grandchildren she's got. Like, I think two of Pat's kids are grandmas. Rose and Teresa. Oh, and Lila. And I don't know about Rosemary's older kids. I think Dickie might be. He lives in Madison. I think he might be a grandpa. And I think, I know Betty and Ed's oldest daughter, Cheryl, has at least 2, maybe 3 kids. You lose track. So those would be great-great-great-grandkids of my grandma's. And that picture you put in the window, that's my grandma, who was the youngest in her family. Then she had a brother just older than her called Uncle Ed, and he had a son named Walter who was kind of slow. And he had one other son and 2 daughters, Lorraine, and that grew up with Ma and Gagey, they're the same age. And then the other lady in that picture is Aunt Rose Sadler. She was just older than Ed. It was Rose, Ed, and Clara. And Rose was married to a man named Ed Sadler. And they were big horse farmers on the other side of Lansing by a little town called Lycurgus. And I think they had somewhere between half a dozen and a dozen kids. And she showed me how to make the most amazing things, 2 things. She showed me how to take wool fabric, coats, dresses, slacks, jackets, whatever, little scraps, big wool blankets. Soak them overnight in hot water so they shrunk. They were almost like felt. Hang them outside to dry in the wind so they'd be pretty square. Cut them into strips this big. Make the strips into balls. When you got 2 bushel basket full of balls of wool strips, write out, lay out, or think out your pattern. Roll those strips into thirds. Sew the seam shut. Make them into piles. After you got 3 bushel baskets full of piles of strips, start braiding. And that's where you make those all wool, hand braided circular rugs. I made one room size to the biggest room in McGregor out of synthetic fabric. And I think I tore it down and gave you part of it 20 years ago or better.
I wish I still had that wool one that you gave me. You gave me 2 of them. Those were really nice.
And if you dabbed up spills, when it got dry, you could sweep it off. And if it didn't get dry or it stayed stiff, you could take cold water and liquid dish soap, like Dawn or something, and wash it and throw it over something where it would air dry. And if it got filthy, you could take it out, put it in the grass, hose it down, get 3 people to help you put it over sawhorses. And after a couple of days, when the dripping slowed down, you get those 3 people to come back and help you stretch it over 5 or 6 clotheslines in a row. Use a whole box of snappy clothespins if you have to keep it on the clothesline. And it would sag your clotheslines. You'd have to tighten them up when you got done. But it would come out absolutely beautiful. It would look better than new. And when you got it on the floor, thread a couple of needles and get down and sit on it and go like this. And any place there was a gap, sew it up. Because if you came through on your high heels and your heel went in that gap, you'd either fall, rip the rug, or both. When Diana had a waterbed, I think before Demetria was born, they got a mattress on sale. And they got rid of their waterbed, and they put a mattress in the frame. They lived on Parkside Terrace. Well, she had these really cool waterbed sheets. You tucked it in, but it was sewed to the top sheet. You tucked in the bottom, and then you pulled up the top sheet. So, when it wore out and you gave it to Nama, the strips were like 40 feet long, the whole length of it. Jessica was learning how to sew. So we took that waterbed sheet. Part of it was purple, lavender, lilac, and part of it had big purple flowers with pink and green. We cut that in strips, rolled it into balls, folded it together, slip stitched it together, and I'd work for hours after she went to bed. And we spent I would say at least three months, and I made her 2 about this size and that size or this size, 2 different rugs, one on each side of the bed. She thought they were so cool. And I said, instead of making it for you, I showed you how. And if you ever get broke, when you're 90 years old, you can sew any kind of fabric together as long as it's similar. Not this and this, but this and this would work. Similar fabric and make rugs and sell them. And I said, if you ever got extra money and you're bored, and you need a new hobby, buy a loom about this wide. It'll go behind a door. Pull that loom out, make smaller strips, and take those balls and run them back and forth in the loom, and make, what did they call those? Those throw rugs everybody had when you were growing up with stripes in them.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember what they were called.
There was.
What did they call them? Rope rugs?
What?
Rope rugs?
Yeah.
Because they were thinner. They were
Yeah.
thinner strips.
They were only this thick.
And they were rolled into like a Tootsie Roll. They were
With
rolled
string between them.
Yeah.
The string was from the loom. And you took a shuttle, a little wooden oval-shaped thing, and you shoved it back and forth between the strings. You had the warp and the weave. The warp went up and down, the weave went back and forth. And there was a couple that were retired, got together, lived together, and collected any old clothing from anybody that would leave a box or a bag on their porch twice a year, in the late spring and in the late fall. And if you had any old clothes, even holy socks, you throw them in that box. Most people were kind enough to wash them. You left the box on your porch. And they would have it announced in the paper, and they would telephone people and talk to people after church and stuff. Tell them, next Saturday we'll be around to get any old clothes you want to get rid of. People were glad to get rid of old junk. Old ratty jeans and holy t-shirts and worn out dish towels. They'd take it home. They'd wash it. If it was a perfect dish towel, they'd press it or fold it, put it aside in a plastic bag. For next year, they'd have a yard sale, and they'd sell wholly spotless things. I mean, clean, spotless things. Cheap. And that was gas money or pocket money. And they would advertise in Decorah, La Crosse, Waukon, Monona, Elkader, Dubuque, and all the little papers in between. They would advertise rag rugs, woven rag rugs, any color, any size, custom made, hand tied. And then for the different sizes, like say 1 by 3 feet, they'd have a price listed. And they had room size ones where they'd take the strips and sew them together, and they'd have seams in them, but they would fit your room. Special orders taken. Can deliver within 50 miles. They made a good retirement out of that. They lived together for at least 20 years that I know of. He was married and divorced, and she had been married, no kids. She had been married and had 2 kids and was widowed. And both of her kids were growing up and married and occupied. So they got together in their 60s or 70s and made a good life for themselves. Were well respected and very generous. And whenever, say you'd have a fire, they would come by as a couple and help you clean up your mess. And if it was all destroyed, they would come and they would ask you, where are you going? Oh, we're going to rent that house over there. Can I look at it? Would you be offended if we bought you 6 rugs and they just give them to them? You know, that's the kind of people they were. Just kind, generous. And anybody that wanted to, if they called on Saturday afternoon, most Saturdays, not every Saturday, but on Saturday afternoon, if you called, you could come over and watch them, and they'd show you how to do it. And if you came like 3, 4 Saturdays in a row, you went home with the rug you made. Nice people. It's funny who you remember and why. Do you remember when Grandma lived in the little greenhouse in New Albin?
Yeah.
Going towards town, east, was a little widow lady, little gray-haired widow lady, tiny woman, named Mrs. Pullman, and she crocheted, you know, made lace. I asked her if she could crochet me a tablecloth. And I told her what size for the dining room table in Chicago. That was in the early 60s. You kids were little. Well, we moved into that house the day Diana started kindergarten. So you kids were young. And I said, she showed me a tablecloth she made for someone else. And she said, I ran out of yarn. Sarah bought me the yarn in lacrosse twice. And she said, I was charging them $75, but she said, I'm going to lose money on this. So I said, I'll pay you the difference so you don't lose any money. She said, you don't have to do that. I said, I got the money, take it. And I said, could you make me a tablecloth like that? Only 4 feet shorter? She said, yeah. Can Sarah get the yarn in lacrosse? It's cheaper. I said, sure, Sarah will pick up the yarn. So she said, it's going to take a long time. I said, that's okay. She said, no. I'd have to charge you more than $50. The bigger one was she was charging $75 for. I said, Elsie, I'll buy the yarn. I'll buy you as many crochet hooks as you want. I'll buy you extra yarn. I'll give you $100. We'll give Sarah a piece of the thread. When you get low on thread, just call Sarah and have her pick up some more yarn. That tablecloth is in a box for Diana. It took her about 3 months in her spare time, and she didn't work at it constantly. It's absolutely beautiful. Beautiful. And I couldn't replace it handmade for less than $5,000 now, because nobody wants to do that. If they know how, they don't want to make something that big. And it's, I'll show it to you, it's finely crocheted. It's not real big pattern. Then I was in an antique store in Moline, Illinois. Moline, Illinois. It's a John Deere tractor museum. And people was with wanted to go to this Swedish place for lunch. It was kind of out of the way, but we went there for lunch. And next to it was a building as big as your Morton building, full of antiques. One whole side, antique fabric. And I found a dresser scarf that would fit that buffet. That's the same pattern, but it's called ecru. It's a kind of a eggshell color, and the trim on the edge is white. And I gobbled that up. And I didn't even argue. I paid the price. And when I would clean my dining room and have company, it looked like it all matched. It just was so beautiful. I don't know if you remember it. For every day I had linen tablecloths put on it. And I should have been as smart as Catalina, what the hell are, Kathy Carson's ma. She had a lace tablecloth and she had a clear plastic drop cloth over it. Well, I had a dinner party one time. Whole bunch of people. And Sammy drank her coffee with sugar and cream in it. She got drunk. She spilled her coffee. She was afraid to tell me on my lace tablecloth. So she covered up with a warm platter of meat. I didn't know how to properly preserve it. So I took it to Lucky Coin, and there was a guy that had, he delivered stuff from his store, and he did specialty items like lace and slip covers and, you know, shit that was hard to do on the west side someplace. So he came in one day and I said, I got a tablecloth that's made out of lace and it's handmade. It's an expensive tablecloth, but it's got coffee that had cream and sugar in it, spilled on it and dried. I said, can you clean it? And he said, sure. I said, are you sure? I said, if you can't, I'll find somebody that can, because to me it's valuable. Mrs. Pullman was dead, you know. You kids were growing up in high school, dating and stuff. I figured that's an heirloom I'll keep forever till I croak. Anyhow, I still got it. I didn't croak. He said, not a problem. And he said, Mrs. Wankle, if I can't make it look like new, no charge. I said, okay. He said, it'll take you at least a week. I said, okay. About 10 days later, he came in, and he had it in a plastic bag. And the way he had it folded, you could see the spot. And I said, thanks for trying. He said, no charge. I said, let me give you something. You had to pay the women that work for you. And they had a big commercial laundry on the west side of Chicago, one of the suburbs, I don't know, I forgot which one. But they did specialty work, and they were not cheap. And I know he should have charged me probably $40-50 for just trying to wash it. He wouldn't take a nickel. I said, thanks. Worked for me. But that's the story of lace tablecloths. Also, if you like lace, my grandmother was born in 1890. She died after she was over 100. She died in 1990. About this time of the year, in May. Anyhow, she was the youngest of 12 children. As soon as her brothers and sisters, they were raised on a farm in Iowa. As soon as they got old enough, they worked for other people as hired men or household help or babysitters or nannies or whatever. I think 3 of her sisters became school teachers, and they all were good workers. But she was the spoiled brat baby at home, so she didn't have to do a lot of heavy work. She learned how to sew when she was little, and she became an expert seamstress. And say you're going to get married in August. She would come and get you. The 2 of you would pick out the fabric and bring it to your house, and she'd sleep on a pallet, on a blanket on the floor, or on a couch or a bed or whatever. And she would make, from your garters holding your nylons up to your headpiece, your gown, your slips, your corset, your pantaloons, your wedding night nightgown with matching peignoir, and handmade slippers to fit, and all of the clothes that you would take on your honeymoon, including knitted stockings, garter belts to hold the stockings up, undergarments to fit you and shape you, some of them with whalebone in to make your tummy look smaller, bustles, if you didn't have a nice round butt, she'd make like gathered taffeta and then cover it with white cotton fabric, and you tied it around your waist, and it made you look like you had a bigger butt, called bustles. Your hair pieces, your hats, sometimes even your gloves, unless you ordered leather ones. If you had lace gloves or cotton gloves or wool gloves. And she'd stay at your house for maybe, depending on when the wedding was and how elaborate it was, maybe overnight, maybe for 3 months. She made everything. And if you had a baby bump, she made all your baby's clothes too.
Gosh.
She could not only knit and crochet and what they call blind stitch. If you ever see something and you can't find the seam, it's sewed together invisibly from underneath. It's called blind stitching. That's how you mend men's wool pants. You blind stitch them from underneath. Slow, delicate work. And most people claim they can't do it. They never want to learn. But she was a called upon seamstress. She stayed with her mommy and daddy on the farm until somebody'd call her or come by in a buggy or see her in church and tell her to go over to the neighbors. They were going to have a wedding or a baby or whatever. She made what they called mourning clothes. Clothes for dead people in the coffin. She might make a real fancy blouse, a real pretty skirt, but she only made half of it. It wasn't buried with you. Afterwards, she'd take it out and make it into a real skirt or a real blouse. She did men's suits and shirts and stuff that way too. But they were called mourning clothes for dead people. And back in those days when you died, if they had an embalmer, he'd come and prepare the body and bring it back to the house. If they didn't have an embalmer, they would put a white tablecloth or something on the table and lay the dead person on there. Or if they had an undertaker, he would bring a flat table, like a big long coffee table, and they'd put the dead person on there with pillows and flowers and sometimes a blanket if it was wintertime over them. But they had wakes in the nicest room in your house, usually the living room. And in those days, big houses with rich people would have 2 parlors. A formal parlor and a parlor which was the living room that people sat in. The formal parlor in rich people's houses was a real elaborate living room. It's real nice furniture in it that was always kept covered when you weren't going to use it. And that was for weddings, christenings, baptisms, confirmations, divorces, betrothals. When 2 sets of parents promised, God bless you.
Thank you.
When 2 sets of parents promised each other's children to marriage when they were too young to get married, they would get betrothed. And then when he got old enough, he'd have saved up money for an engagement ring. And then when she got old enough, they'd get married. Some of them were betrothed when there weren't any bigger than the twins, right?
Yeah.
Especially if that guy's wife had a big farm and no kids, 2 kids, and this guy's wife was a sister to that guy's wife. They'd get together and betroth each other's kids to each other to make it one big farm after they were dead. That was common. And if you lived in a city, quite often you bought your apartment and somebody in the next apartment might get betrothed to one of your kids or something. Sometimes money changed hands, sometimes a handshake, sometimes a bottle of whiskey, but it was usually made out with the mother's approval by the 2 fathers. And sometimes they were related, and sometimes they weren't. And if it was a family that didn't object, their religion or their background didn't object, they would have cousin marry cousin to keep the money and the property in the family.
Well, the elite still do that.
What?
The elite people of the world still do that. And I think that was something they kind of imposed on people to not do that, so you wouldn't accrue wealth over generations.
Right.
And that was the whole reason they started with inheritance tax too. But if you're intermarried, there's no inheritance tax either. You just
Right.
switch the money around.
And there were times when a 5-year-old boy had a 45-year-old girl cousin that had multiple sclerosis or cancer, something that she was going to die from. They would betroth that 5-year-old boy to his 45-year-old cousin with a marriage contract. And if she died, they were automatically married. And he got all her money. And he might be 6 when he got all her money. And if he got old enough to be of majority, which was either 16 or 18, depending on where you live, if he got old enough to be of majority, he could buy his way out of the betrothal contract if he had the money, and he wanted to. But otherwise, to hear in the paper that John Jones married Mary Jones. John Jones was 7, and Mary Jones was 48. 2 months later, Mary Jones died. He gets all her money. And they never acted like husband and wife. Sometimes they never even saw each other. That's how it was. And in some provinces and countries in Europe, royalty could buy their spouse. Prince Charming saw you, and you don't have any royal blood. You can't have a big fancy wedding. Go to your dad and say, "What did you take for your daughter?" Robert says she's not for sale. And sooner or later, he'd trick Robert into signing a paper. And he might buy you for $1,000. Some people that were poor and had 20 kids would say, "How much do you want for your daughter?" "Well, she's pretty solid and she's a good worker. You get 50 years out of her if you marry her. I'll take $50. Okay. They just sold their kids.
It's horrible.
Remember reading that in history or hearing about it? They don't talk about it nowadays.
Yeah.
But I grew up hearing that, learning that.
Well,
I know
people have been bought and sold by other people since the beginning of time.
I remember Grandma's brother, Uncle Gus, who was 2 kids older than Rosa. Louisa and Frank were in between. So he was probably 10 years older than my grandma. I remember him saving his money from the selling lumber at the sawmill and going to Germany and coming back 2 months later by ship. And the whole county was there to celebrate. And he brought home a brand new bride from Germany that couldn't speak a word of English except Gus. The only word she could say was her husband's name. But boy, could they chatter in German. And there were probably only 50 of us there that couldn't either speak or understand at least some German. But Uncle Gus's wedding made the Minneapolis paper and the La Crosse paper and the Dubuque paper and the Des Moines paper, and then I think Sioux Falls or Sioux City. But it was in 5 papers. And it was framed in their living room. They were pretty proud of that. But beautiful, beautiful woman. And he was kind of built like Wimpy, kind of short and stout, kind of fat. Laughed all the time. Good-natured guy. And he always had white peppermints in his suit pocket, his inside suit pocket. And he'd say, Patty, I don't want to talk to you. Hey, Katie K. He'd call me Katie K. Because I had a couple other cousins that were Kathy or Kathleen or Kate or something. Hey, Katie K, come here. He'd say, should you pick up the eggs for Clara today, for Grandma today? Yeah. And I didn't break any of them. You want to see them? No, but I got something for you. And he'd give me one little, size of a fingernail, white peppermint. He'd say, stick it in your cheek and don't tell Patty. I thought I died and went to heaven. I got a special treat for talking to Uncle Gus. And he was kind of I was a little kid. He was kind of a big, burly, whiskery, gray-haired, fat guy. And if you wanted to talk to Pat and she didn't know you, you better hold out the peppermint. And she'd come and grab it. Or candy cane or whatever, jelly bean. But she wouldn't talk to strangers. And I loved everybody, you know. Ma used to always threaten me. Stranger danger, looks like a regular person. He might be hiding in the alley. He could be driving a car or a truck. He could be walking down the sidewalk. You're not going to know him. He's looked like a regular person, and he's going to grab you, sell you to the gypsies. And the gypsies will cook you up and eat you.
Dear.
I don't want the stranger to get me, Ma. Shut up, ball baby.
Dear.
I was a ball baby brat from the time I could walk. If I do this, I was always bawling. So I was a ball baby brat, and I deserved it. But my brother Donald was younger than me, and he was my mom's favorite. And I had bigger and harder than Frankie's. And he was banging his head all the time.
Dear.
And he'd say, ouch, have a big red lump, ouch, and walk away. He didn't bawl, he didn't cry. And Pat would only cry if she saw blood. Hers or yours, she'd cry if she saw blood. But I bawled. If I hiccuped, I'd bawl. If I fell down, I'd bawl. If I banged into something, I'd bawl. And I always had big feet, and I was never graceful. I learned that when I bought my first pair of high heels, how to be graceful. But before that, I'd open a door and walk into the doorway. Walk across the room and trip on a throw rug. Walk past this and bump a hip bone. I was just a klutz, just a big ball baby. Very vocal. Ma, 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 I fell down, Ma, Ma. Well, goddamn it, get up. For an hour. I can see why she'd get aggravated with me. I gotta tell you something. I fell down the steps. We had an open stairway going up to the attic with no railings and just one wall. I fell down the steps one day. And I'm laying there bawling. And my Aunt Marilyn, my dad's younger sister, she came over and grabbed me by the arm. And she said, "You cracked the floor." Then I really bawled. And I believed her. I thought that line on the floor that I cracked probably weighed 40 pounds, 50 pounds. I said, "Don't tell Ma, don't tell Ma, don't tell Daddy."
Remember when you told that to Joshua Spinner?
Yeah, on the sidewalk.
And he was kind of proud of himself. That was
Josh,
fun.
you cracked the sidewalk. He fell and skinned his knee, and I told him he cracked the sidewalk so he wouldn't bawl. He was little. He believed me. Little kids always believe me. But wasn't he fun to have around?
Yeah. He was kind of like a little brother to me.
I used to wish, after Sammy was in the hospital a second time, and she and Spinner were fighting so much, used to wish that they'd get divorced and she'd have to move in with us because she didn't have any place else to go. And then you and Diana would have a little brother and a little sister because I knew I couldn't make any more. But that's very selfish. Simone was only 3. I think Josh was 5, 5.5. God, she was sick. When she was younger than Laura, she kept falling down. And we kept picking her up. And finally, Ma took her to the hospital, to the Coding twins. They were good friends of Ma's, and they were RNs that worked at the hospital. And you could sneak a kid in after hours without paying. Finally, Ma took her to the hospital, and Dr. Vernon came. She was on call, and she looked at her, and they put her in this machine bigger than an incubator, but smaller than an MRI, called an iron lung. She had polio. And it settled in her pelvis on the right side. If it would have been on the left side, it would have completely destroyed the kidneys. But it settled in the right side, and it atrophied the right kidney, which means the kidney just shut down and didn't grow anymore. She didn't know it. She grew up. She got married. She got pregnant. Thank God. He was watching. Thank God her husband was in the Navy. All her medical expenses were covered. She had that baby in Iowa, in Waukon, and they life flighted it down to Iowa City, which has Iowa City Hospital and medical school and medical university. Lots of good medicine there. They life flighted him down there. He was born with a little soft spot in the back of the neck, like everybody has, and no soft spot on his skull, on the top of his head. And he had, I think, I could be wrong on the number, I think he had 19 surgeries before he started school. They had to cut, reshape, and fabricate a solid skull on an infant. And it didn't cost him anything. And that was, her husband was in the military. He had to go back to the Navy. And that was military hospital that talks to you and decides how much you can afford. And they set her up in housing. They got her a little studio apartment free. And she stayed there. She'd go back to Waterville once in a while and see Ma and the kids. And sometimes Sissy and Tatey, her in-law parents, or one of Josh's siblings, or Mike or Donald or somebody from the family would go and spend a weekend with her or whatever, but
I tried.
she got to be skin and bones. Oh, that's sweet. Then she had her second daughter, her second child, and from her pregnancy weight, when she got pregnant, to her cesarean section, she lost 53 pounds, which isn't good for you or the baby. And then when Joshua must have been 5, Simone was 3, she got a real bad kidney infection and had to go to the hospital. And they forced her dead kidney into working. She was there twice. Once I had the kids in Chicago, and once I had them in McGregor. And thank God that Richard stayed in the military as long as he did and paid his health insurance premiums after he got out. Thank God. Because a normal person couldn't afford all those surgeries and all that special therapy and, you know. I called him bad boy all night the other night. After he jumped on Ziva, I think. Ziva? Yeah. Ziva's lake.
Yeah, he really scared her. He didn't knock her down, though.
I don't think he hurt her or broke the skin. I think he scared her.
Yeah, he didn't break the skin.
Yeah. She gets kind of vicious sometimes.
She
Oh,
sure
yeah.
hung close to her mom
He
after
attacked
that.
my leg the other day.
Yeah, he doesn't stop when he starts attacking people. Yeah,
Attack cat.
That's why I had to keep him outside, because he kept doing it to me, and I had to lock him out of my room.
One of them caught a bird earlier, and then the bird got loose, and then the bird was in the tree squawking for about 20 minutes after that.
You got a bird?
I renamed Spigot. I'm calling him Duncan Jr.
Why?
because I like that name better.
There can only be one Duncan.
Duncan was definitely one of a kind.
Heck, after he was gone for 3 months, he still came back.
He did that for years. Duncan was gone, I think, one time he might have been gone for a whole year, and then he came back. And then he had a brother named Scar that started doing the same thing. And then we finally had Scar fixed. And then Scar stayed around, and did he one time just disappear?
One time he left and he didn't come back. But Duncan and Scar looked just alike. Scar had a little scar on his face.
Yeah, Scar, the best cat ever was Shaky, though.
His
Shaky was
teeth are sure
Duncan's mom.
pointed. His teeth are pointed.
Like a dog. As long as you don't start deciding you want to use my leg as a scratching post. Oh, he got under my jeans. I was sitting on that chair and he just wrapped his whole body around my leg and started putting his claws in.
Starts climbing your legs. Lucky you were wearing jeans. I've been pantsless a few times.
The wind is whistling through my amp. I only hear half of what you say.
Oh, we were just talking about the cat attacking us.
They're so
He's a good
affectionate.
mouser, though.
Yeah, that one is. I watched him spend at least a half hour watching something down there in the weeds and pacing and watching. And then he went sneaking around, sneaking down the steps and sat on the second from the bottom step up. After a while, it just shook his head and walked upstairs. Must have got off in the weeds or something. But he was watching close, something. I don't know if it was a grasshopper or a mouse or...
Well, I've got little moles around here, and they'll.
What?
I've got little moles around here, and
Yeah.
they'll leave the moles. Some of them used to bring them up on the porch, but they won't eat the moles. They must not taste as good as mice, but they'll still kill them.
There's a thing called boil, and it's bigger than a mouse, but it's smaller than a rat. And they are longer and skinnier than a mouse. They can get in cracks that nothing else can get into. They could maybe follow a spider in a crack, but they're called V-O-I-L, voil. And they got a shorter tail than a mouse or a rat. But they're sneaky suckers. Who was it? I think Mrs. Schaefer had her washer and dryer in her basement, and one got trapped in her dryer. She had to call a maintenance man to come and get it out. And it was dead. She brought it to PTA meeting and showed it to us and told us what it was. I thought it was a skinny mouse until I looked at it. They're real pale gray. You can hardly see them. And they go like, you think you saw something and you look and it's gone. Been gone. Feels so good to sit outside.
It's a beautiful day.
The last 4 days have been beautiful.
Yeah, it's gonna stay hot.
But
It's gonna stay hot.
I like hot.
Let's see about it.
Cold makes my knees and my feet and my hands hurt. And makes me swell
right
up
now.
more.
It's 80.
Yeah, right now it's 80. It's
Makes
supposed to be
me
up to
crabbier.
84.
Being cold.
Yeah, it's gonna stay in the 80s and 70s. Pretty much. That's good. I think it's officially summer.
Yep. Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, it's
Memorial Day. It's Memorial Day today.
Yeah. We're supposed to go in my front closet. And on the left-hand side, in the corner, there's some rolled up little flags to wave. And on the left-hand side, in the big corner, there's a flag that would fit in that flagpole. And they'd have been up with dawn if I was home. And the little handheld flags would be unfolded and weighted down. And anybody that came around, I'd give them a flag. Go out and wave the flag. And we had parades. Wow.
Yep, all the parades were canceled. I saw some fireworks last night, though, when I was driving to Bloomington.
Oh, Jesus.
Chicago had great parades. And any damned excuse they could think of. Besides St. Patrick's Day, there was I think a Kosciuszko Polish parade, and there was a St. Joseph Italian parade, and there was maybe St. Wenceslaus Yugoslavian parade. We went to all of them. They were free. And I'd get behind some little kids, especially if I'd find a couple little kids, not my kids, somebody else's kids, sitting on the curb. And I'd stand behind them and I'd wave my hands and I'd say, "Throw us some candy, throw us some candy." And I'd run out in the street with a Walmart bag or a grocery bag. We'd come home with a whole bag of candy. And if one of the little kids that I didn't know started crying or something, I'd give them a couple pieces. But otherwise, it was mine. And I don't think I ever paid full price for a bag of jelly beans or chocolate-covered Easter eggs. The day after the holiday, I'd be down at Walgreens getting his sacks full of half-price stuff. Used to go to Fannie Mae's outlet, and when we lived on the west side, to the Tootsie Roll factory. And you could go in there, and they'd give you a brown paper sack, and you could fill it up with Tootsie Rolls that had two wrappers on, or were lopsided, or too long, or too short. Came out round instead of oval shaped. All you had to do is go in and ask for it. And they had a lady with white clothes and a white cap on. She'd hand you the sack, and if you got it half full, she'd say, "Let me fill it up," and she'd stuff it so it was sticking out. Free. Within walking distance when Robert was a toddler. We used to meet the bro chicks there sometimes. The daddy in that family, bro chicks, they lived maybe 4 blocks from us. The daddy was a fireman that worked with Robert's daddy. And the mom was a nurse that went to work at night. And her sister or her mother watched the kids when she went to work. She had 6 kids. I think about half of them older than Diane and half of them your age or younger. There was Georgie and Susie, Philip.
We played with some of their kids, I remember. They used to have those tunnels in their basement. You could crawl through their tunnels.
Yeah, that's because Georgie and Susie crawled in their mother's hope chest, which was made out of cedar. They were playing hide and go seek, and the lid came down. And what was the older one's name?
Susie?
I forgot. Kathy. Kathy came and told her mother that the kids were in her trunk, and they were both unconscious when Faye pulled them out. She did CPR and had Philip call the ambulance, and they both lived, but they both had mental and physical therapy they had to go through. So they had these big, round, flexible tunnels that they had to crawl through to give them mobility. And she had to teach them their names, how to count, the alphabet. I think the boy was older than you, and I think Susie was younger than you. I'm not positive. But they were little. She saved their lives.
And Georgie was a little slow.
But
I remember Georgie was a little slow.
yeah.
But he was really kind-natured.
Yeah.
He was fun to play with.
They were both
He's a big kid.
sweet, loving, generous kids. I think that was her two youngest. I'm not sure. Because by the time you'd go over there and play, Kathy was the oldest, and I think she was starting high school or close to it. And then Philip, and then two more kids, but they had 6 kids altogether. I forgot the middle kids' names. They were a nice family. I remember
The dad was a barber.
What?
The dad was a barber. He used to cut my hair and
Yeah,
Dad's hair.
at the firehouse.
Or he had a, didn't he? I thought he had a barber chair in his basement too, didn't he?
Yeah. And he had one at the firehouse in the kitchen, and one in his own house in the basement. And when he cut John Wankel's hair, first time he cut it, he slapped John on the cheek. And he said, "Quit bawling, you big calf." And he said, "It'll grow back." But Bob wasn't letting no long-haired, drug-addicted teenager move into my house with my kids. No way. I remember the first night John came up from a shower, came up from the basement. He had clean underwear on and a towel in his hair, and a towel wrapped around his shorts, his undershorts. And I said, "Come here." And his ears were filthy. I said, "You get back down there. Wash your greasy hair again. Scrub your filthy ears and any other stinky spots you got on you. And if you don't come up clean, I'll come down and get in the shower with you and scrub you with a brush all over." "I'll be clean, Auntie Kay. Don't hit me. Get going." And he was as tall as I am, real wiry. I think he was about just 16 when he came out of reform school. He and another boy, the bad boy, hot-wired or got the ignition wired together or something. A new Mach 5, whatever that is.
A Mach 1 Mustang.
Mach 1.
Mach 5.
And got busted in St. Louis, Missouri from Harvey, Illinois, Cary, Illinois.
Yeah, I talked to John. He knew all about the car. They'd been working on it. It was a built car. It was a car that was built for performance. And I don't know if he got the keys or whatever, but
Well, John used to get paid from one of the dealers in either Cary or the next town over to wash and hand wax hubcaps and shit like that. You know. He was just a kid. And Albert was brilliant and a straight A student. And when he got in junior or senior year, a hired tutor. And Jeanette was smart. But John was defiant. And he was not smart, not stupid, he was smart. But he wouldn't do it. Or if Rose stood there and made him do a homework page when he's in 4th or 5th grade, as soon as she walked out of the room, he'd tear it up and throw it in the garbage. And it would be perfect. And Tommy was the baby boy. And Tommy was a crybaby. And Tommy got carried around by mom or dad or grandma or great-grandma until I started kindergarten, I think. Oh, pick up the baby. We're going in the other room. Bring the baby. 5 years old. Carry the baby. And that child would do anything Jeanette told him to do. She told him to get up on a chair and take a dish towel, and put that apron on, and dry all the dishes. He'd do it. If she told him, go out and sweep the sidewalk in front, he'd do it. Just big. She told him, you took a bath last night. Here's the Ajax. Go clean out the tub. He'd do it. John would say, do it yourself. Albert would say, I got homework. Four such different children in the same house. Do you remember where they lived, 2 blocks from us on Costner?
Yeah.
That was Grandma Frankenhauser's house. And she was a widow. She was a little tiny, frail lady. And she had this big 2-story house with a full basement and a full attic. And after she was widowed for maybe how many odd years, and her kids were all grown up and married, and her grandkids were grown up and married, she had a stroke. So John and Rose brought her to their apartment, and she insisted on going home. And as soon as she could go home, they took the second parlor on the first floor and made it into a bedroom for her, moved her furniture down and whatever. And Rose would go over every day before she went to work, check on her, and when Helen would get in a fight with her Bob, she'd move in with Grandma for a while. And between her 3 kids, Barbara would stay at her mother's because her husband had a good job. Between her 3 kids, she'd stay at her mother's that night because she didn't have to work. She was married to a Bob, too. Well, then, Grandma died or fell. Grandma Frankenhauser fell. Bob was looking for an apartment because we were going to get married that fall. Grandma Dieter, which was Rose's mother, Rose, Helen, Barbara, the other one, her sisters, and John and their husbands got together, and I wasn't there, talked to Bob, and they decided he would have to move Rose's stuff, the kids' stuff, the toys, everything, clean out the garage. Paint, put new carpeting down in the living room. And we could rent that apartment, 2-bedroom apartment, with a back porch and a front porch and a backyard and a 2-car garage for $65 a month. And on my hand. So Diana and I went over and she slept in a laundry basket while I painted. We cleaned it up and painted it. Watched the guy put down the carpeting so that if we ever wanted to put down carpeting ourselves, we'd know how to do it. And then instead of getting married on October 15th, we got married on November 3rd. But that was a nice apartment. On Costner, 1936 North Costner. And there's bumblebees buzzing around on your eaves.
Yeah, that's okay.
Watch where they land. You might be able to get honey.
We used to have some.
Or tack a little thin wooden box in a corner on the ceiling. They might move in. They might not, but they might. But whenever John and Rose needed a babysitter, you kids, I would go over and spend the night. And when I needed a babysitter, I could drop my kids off in an emergency, but not daily or weekly because John worked days and Rose worked nights. And they'd meet for supper. What an amazing life. Thank you for keeping some of my memory.
You want some dipping eggs?
No. About 2 eggs a month is all I eat. Quite often hard-boiled. If Gabby or Danielle are coming up, or Diana, I hard-boil 6 or 8 eggs because Layla likes to peel them. And Frankie eats the white, like you did, and Layla eats the yolk, like Diana did. And don't expect either one of them to eat a whole egg, unless it's scrambled. And the toast is cut into triangles. And they get a glass of milk with chocolate in it. But they don't like omelets. They call them mixed up. Especially if they got onions or peppers or tomatoes or whatever in them. And they stick their finger in the cheese in omelets, but they don't want to eat the egg. But when you're the only little one, you pretty much get to do what you want. You wouldn't know about that. looking backwards over the years, did some of your sisters try to spoil you? If you had a balsam wood cheesecake or cheese cheese box made out of balsam wood, and you tacked it up in that corner, you might be able to get honey in the fall. They don't go in cardboard or plastic, or they don't nest in them, but they will in balsam wood, especially if there's a couple of slots or cracks bigger than they are to go into. And directly opposite their opening is where they'll start making a honeycomb. When I was little, I got to go out in the woods with Grandpa Smearod and watch him smoke honey, smoke bees out of a knot that he had to put a ladder up, find the hole in the tree. I watched him do that. I had to sit over there, but I watched him do that. It was cold. And he broke me off, before we got to the house, he broke me off a piece of honeycomb. And he said, suck on it until it's not juicy anymore, and then chew it like gum. I thought a piece of fresh honeycomb was the best thing in the world, because it was honey and gum. The waxy part you could chew when you drank all the honey out of it. It was just a little piece, it wasn't much. I thought it was pretty special. I thought he was pretty special. I adored my grandparents. When he used to plow with Dick and Sandy, he plowed with a team of horses. Big old, wide, slow-moving horses. And one time Pat and I were whining before she started school. And Grandma asked him if he'd take us down and give us a ride to the end of the row and back. And Wimpy would be there to help us off. Wimpy and George. Sure. On the way, before we got to the creek where the end of the road was, row of corn was, Pat was wiggling around, and she was going to do acrobats or something on the horse's back. She's probably 5 or 6. She fell off. Grandpa stood there and hollered for Al and Clara to come and rescue Pat. That was my aunt and my uncle. They were young. My Aunt Clara was only 8 years older than me. So they came down through the cornfield, and Clara cleaned her up, wiped her face off, and Al gave her a piggyback ride home through the cornfield. Clara said, should I take Katie K? Nah, she's okay. So I got to ride on the horse's back all the way to the creek and stay on his back, holding on while the horse drank. And then we went all the way back to the barn. That was one of the best days of my life so far, because I could spend all that time with just my grandpa. And he listened to anything I said. And he told me stories about different stuff about how the Indians taught the white people how to plant corn and dry it and grind it into meal and make it into corn cakes, how to boil it and eat it that way, how to cut it off the cob and boil it, or dry it and preserve it for winter when it was cut off the cob. And he said, when we get home, I'll have Mommy make corn pudding for dessert tonight. So she made corn pudding, and that's a memory I've kept for 75 years. What a great memory.
That is a great memory.
And the thrill that I could remember it. And I can see Grandpa, he always had a team of horses. And he took plows or rakes or hoes or snow shovels or whatever to him that needed to be. And Dick was a left-hand horse, and Sandy was a right-hand horse. And Sandy minded better. So he'd holler at Dick first, then he'd holler at Sandy. Sandy'd do it, and Dick would follow Sandy. And the back of my grandpa's neck was like diagonal crisscross from going like this all his life. And I used to wait till he'd fall asleep in the rocker. He had a cane back rocker, and I'd stand behind him and touch those cracks on his neck. They just fascinated me. They were crisscross. Grandma would say, Katie, come here. She'd always have a job for me. Would you put this away? Or would you set the table? Or she'd always have a job when she called me. Something important. Oh, guess what she did when I was little? She'd go out in the chicken coop and she'd gather a basket of chicken eggs. And by holding them to her ear and running them down her neck, she knew if there was a chicken in there or not. She knew if they were fertile. She was on a farm for 60 years, so she knew. And she would get a cut down cardboard box, and put rags or towels in the bottom of it. Stick those eggs in there. Stick them under her wood-burning stove in the kitchen, and get up at night and check on them. And check on them during the day. And you had to go in and out the side doors. You couldn't open the back door when the eggs were in there. And if it got drafty, she'd roll up blankets or something and put them around that little box. About this time of year, the eggs would start cracking. And these little wet peeps would come out with their hair, yellow hair sticking out in all directions. They didn't have feathers yet. And they had to be 2 weeks old before you could sit down and spread out your skirt and catch one and put it on your lap. But don't touch it very much. It had to be 2 weeks old. Before that, you could only look at them. And then she'd let us name them. And we'd dream up real bizarre names for them. Mary Jo Johnson Jones or something like that. Or Kathleen Frances Whipplewhite. That was my favorite name for critters. Well, I don't know who the hell Whipplewhite was. Probably somebody in a comic book. But we get to name them. When they start getting ugly, They'd be about this big. They'd start growing straight feathers out of their wings, and they'd get bald up here, and their butt feathers would start growing up this way instead of, just being fur. They'd start growing butt feathers up. Then, if you held the gates and you minded, you could follow Wimpy out when he took them out and put him in the brooder house. This was a special round-shaped building with a light that came down with a real big shade on it and strong lights under it. The light was probably this far off the floor, and the floor had fine gravel, and on top of that, straw. And the babies moved out there. And usually for a week or so, Wimpy would be doing his job. He liked it. He'd camp out in the brooder house in case they got in trouble. And they had special feeders that were like a bottle about this big around, and had a handle on the bottom of it. And then a little flat with a lip about that big, red bottom with little slots in it for the chickens to drink their water out of. And he'd have to change the water and change the straw that they pooped on, and make sure the lamp was where it was supposed to be, and make sure all the chickens were there. Because if they got a hole in the brooder house, a snake or a rat could come in and get those baby chickens. So he was doing his job, camping out in the brooder house. And then they went to a chicken house that held about 100 chickens that were not quite grown. And a guy from the hatchery in Caledonia would drive down in his pickup, and you paid him to what they called candle the babies. And he could tell if they were roosters or hens, if they were boys or girls, male or female.
You can tell by their wings.
And he'd separate them. I couldn't tell the difference.
You can tell by their wings. When they're little chicks, if you look at their wings, I think if it's like straight, then...
Well, he tipped them over and looked at their bottoms. Anyhow, he got paid to do it, so I don't know what he did. But then the ones that were going to be capons, it's a half-grown rooster that's the greatest roasting chicken you can find.
Look at that little yellow bird over there. Over by
those that were going to be...
Over by the mud puddle there. There's a little yellow bird.
What can you see?
If you go to the mud puddle and then to the right, see that dandelion? To the left of that, there's a little yellow bird. Oh, he just went down into the tire rut.
There he is.
Bunch of big old bees.
I think it's the same one. He keeps coming over here.
When Demi's with me and she stays overnight or 2-3 days, she puts me on her smartphone and records what I tell her. And she'll ask me questions. Did you ever go to New York City? Oh yeah. When I was pregnant with Robert. I tell her all about it. I was pregnant with you, I went to New York City. And Niagara Falls. And got the shit scared out of me looking down at Niagara Falls.
Yeah, you went to Niagara Falls on your honeymoon, didn't you?
What?
Didn't you go to Niagara Falls on your honeymoon?
No, we went to Miami Beach. We got married in November. And guess what I got? A genuine gray mink stole. We stayed at the Carillon Hotel, which is a big high-dollar hotel. And we went down to we had room service when we wanted it. But we'd get all gussied up in the morning and go down and sit at the table, and they'd wait on you and bring you different baskets of rolls and sweet rolls and 4 kinds of juice, take your choice, and coffee, milk, tea, whatever you want to drink. And anything you felt like ordering, from Belgian waffles to scrambled eggs or anything in between. Pancakes, French toast, breakfast sausage, probably 8 kinds of hot and cold cereal. Oh my God, did they feed you. And then lunch, you had your choice.
Oh, there's
They
2
had
yellow birds over there now.
room service,
Did you see them fly up?
a lunchroom, or one corner of the dining room where you had your lunch. That was a la carte, anything you wanted off the menu, a huge menu. Supper was formal. If you stayed in, you could go out to a restaurant, but if you stayed in, you fixed your hair, you put on makeup, you put on a cocktail dress or something. Bob put on a suit and tie, got all gussied up, and you went down to the dining room. They had a matter day that would seat you. They had a hostess that would hand you a menu. You had a busboy bring you water and offer you something to drink. And then you had a waiter. And if you told one of them you wanted to see the wine list, you had this guy come in with a towel over his arm, and he'd tell you what was in a kamikaze or cosmopolitan, tell you probably 50 different kind of drinks. Some of them, the only difference would be a cherry or a strip of lime or a piece of lemon. That made it 2 different kind of drinks. I didn't know what half of them were, because I always drank beer. So every night I'd order something else, not knowing if it was going to be something sweet like an old-fashioned, if it was going to be something like a extra dry martini with 3 olives. They're nasty. But whatever the hell it was, I'd taste it. And if I didn't drink it all, they'd come and ask me if they could replace my drink for something fresh. I found out what daiquiris and Bacardis were in Miami Beach. One night, Bob and a waiter had to get me to the elevator, help me into my room, call for the maid to undress me, because I was snoring by then, put me in bed. I told Bob, I won't do that again. Tomorrow I'm ordering beer. He said, well, you're on your honeymoon. You can do whatever you want to. I was 20 years old. And I thought I was a princess. God, he was good to me. He'd zip up my dress. He'd hold my jacket. He'd help me in my mink stole. He'd hook my necklaces, say, hold still. He'd put on my earrings. Every once in a while he'd say, I like those earrings. Let's try this. And he'd pull out a new necklace or a locket or something. and stand behind me and put on a new piece of jewelry. My mother, and especially Pat, my sisters were so jealous of me having Bob Wankle that they would deliberately go in my house and walk off with a blanket that I use all the time. And I'd say, "Did you take my lilac-colored blanket?" "Oh shit, Bob Wankle will buy you a new one." That was their attitude. That's how they treated me. And Bob and I got married on November the 3rd. Mike, with a brown shopping bag full of her valuables, knocked on our door on November the 30th, just when I was cutting Bob's 40th birthday cake. And he went outside and paid the cab from Union Station. And she moved in for 3 years. And while she was there, Sammy moved in. We made her a wedding with Spinner. She moved to Waterville. Donald came home on leave. He stayed with us. A bunch of shit disappeared when he left. Bridget moved in with us. Went on a 2-day drunk. And she came home. Bob was leaving for the firehouse and she was coming home. 7:30 in the morning. He said, "Bridget, will you be home tomorrow morning at this time?" She said, "Yeah." He says, "I want to talk to you." And he left. About 10 hours later, she left. And then Kenny Joe came. And then Banjo and Teresa came for summer. They were in school. And Kenny went home and graduated and went on his class trip to Vietnam. And Vanjie and Bridget were in and out of my house. Bridget when Bob wasn't home. She knew when firehouse nights. And Vanjie when Bob was home. They kind of moved into the basement. Donald came home when he got out of the military. He was in Germany. Kenny came to my house on leave twice, and about 6 months after he got out, he and Ricky Johnson hitchhiked from New Jersey to Chicago, and they moved in. When Sammy's kids were there, whether they were sick, they were here. Most of the while, Michelle was pregnant with Nicola. She lived at our house. After Billy Brown got dropped off in Toma, Wisconsin, and picked up Sarah's Cadillac, the summer after Bob died, I counted back. In 28 years, I could count 28 months when it was just Bob and me and my kids. So did I have company ever? Hell no, they moved in. I don't regret it. And then after my dad died, My mom would bring, Tom was in Upper Iowa University in college. Sherry was in Dubuque in college. And she'd bring her 6 youngest kids anytime they were all out of school, and they'd just stay as long as they wanted to. One time I threw a fit. Brian and Jerry moved that cobra in, that big fat snake, in the basement without letting me know. When I found out Rachel was in the basement, I threw a fit. A snake this big around, long as from me to that wall.
It was a boa constrictor.
Hiding in your house?
6 foot 4 inches long, and her name was Raquel.
What?
Her name was Raquel.
Oh, Raquel. Oh, well.
I would have freaked out. I don't do snakes. They're creepy.
David Carroll had 2 daughters, Rachel and Renee, and a son named Michael.
I'm gonna go get some water.
Could you bring me some? I got a glass right here.
That's so cute. Great colors. Goes with lots of different things. Well, I left you some cigarettes on the arm of the chair. We still got a whole carton and 2/3 or something of the other carton, so. You tell Laura when you're alone with her, tell her Nama knows she talks too much. And it's okay to get up and walk away. Or it's okay to say, change the subject. Or it's okay to say, I don't want to hear about that, or I don't want to talk about that. Or just shut up. Because the last couple of years have been so depressing. When I first moved to Evansdale, I had a truck. I could still drive. After I get rid of my truck, I could still treat at the restaurants. And you heard me in the store. If there's anything you want, throw it in the cart. That became a habit. Just goes on plastic and I don't worry about it. Gets taken care of. And I think twice after Connie started working at Casey's and Dicer, Benji came up without having me fill a gas tank up. Most of the time it'd be between an 1/8 and empty, or between an 1/8 and 4th. Just fill it up. What the hell? And while she was pumping her gas with her mask and her gloves on and her plastic bags over her gloves, lots of times she'd go in and take plastic and get a carton of cigarettes or bananas if we were at Quick Star or whatever, box of beer. It's only money. Who gives a shit? I figured I owed her something for driving me. Once she took me to Hy-Vee, it's a big grocery store, big grocery chain. went to the one by the hospital, and I was feeling good. And she said, I'm going to take a separate card.
Thank you.
I'm going to look at something I don't eat, bratwurst or something. And I had, at the most, 10 items in my grocery cart. I was then going to the food bank, so what did I need? Kleenex and toilet paper and paper towels, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe some specialty donuts or something, but when I went to check out, it was over $300. She had 2 carts full. One of them was full of dog food and cat treats. She drove me here. She let me shop. She's going to take me home. Don't say a word except thank you. God bless you, darling.
Bless your heart.
What?
Bless your heart.
Bless your heart, little sister. God is watching us. Isn't it a beautiful day? That beats. You dirty, rotten, blankety blank for 45 minutes without repeating yourself. I know cuss words I hope you never hear. They're bad. And I know them all. Forgot some of them, but I know them all. Bless your heart, drive home safe. I'll call you when I get there. You don't have to. I will. Did you get all your stuff put away? Yeah. I still got 2 bags to go get out in the truck, but I thought I'd check in with you. Okay, have a nice afternoon. Don't forget it's Wednesday. We're going to Chicago tonight. Okay. On the local channel would be Chicago MD, Chicago PD, and Chicago FD. The Chicago Fire Department, Chicago Police Department, and Chicago Medical. And they were on Wednesday night in between each other. Commercials in between. But commercials gave you time to eat supper. Then put away your leftovers. Then run your dishes through the hot water and rinse them. Then empty out the dish drainer and get out the dish towel. Then lay out your pajamas. Only 2 commercials left. Do I want to shower tonight or tomorrow? And then, what book am I taking to bed with me tonight? And you brush your hair and soak your teeth and take out your plug and put your shoes where you can find them and go to bed. For 2 years. Yeah. But Wednesday was the highlight of my day. Because Wednesday we'd go anywhere between 6 and 8. I'd be downstairs waiting for my ride. And then we'd go to the hospital. And I'd get checked in. And then I'd wait by the lab. And I'd get my lab work done. And then after lab work, I'd get my vitals taken. They'd go on the lab work paper. Then it would go into the doctor. And 3 hours after I signed in, They'd decide what kind of IV they were going to run in me. And they'd never tell you. They'd tell Vanjie or Kenny, but they'd never tell you. So you might lay there and fall asleep with this, or you might read yourself to sleep, or you might stay awake and watch people go back and forth. And you might be there from, well, you'd get in the chair at 10:30, but they'd hook you up around 11. And you might be able to leave at 11:30, or you might not be able to leave till 5:30 at night, depending on what your lab work said, what your chemo cocktail was made up of, how many bottles had to go up, how many IV bottles weren't compatible, so they had to run saline water through you in between, depending on your reaction. Twice I ended up with full body hives. Had to go over to the hospital from the clinic. Once they kept me overnight. Kenny was mad as hell. Had to come back and get me the next day. They took me over by ambulance. And they told him, we don't know how long it'll take, we'll call you. So Nancy called in a couple times and they said I was being admitted. And next day about noon they called Kenny. And he had to quit what he was doing. And he's retired. He had to quit mowing or whatever the hell he was doing and come and get me. And I said, there's no rush. Come when you get around to it. I'm comfortable. And I just got dressed and waited in the lobby for him. Signed some papers that I was competent. Left. Most of the time it went smooth. And most of the time I'd be home 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon at the latest. Occasionally I'd run into 5 or 6, but not very often. And twice I had to stay. Once they released me at midnight and I said, I'm not leaving until after 8 o'clock. At 8 o'clock I'm going to call my brother. I'm not going to bother him now. Okay. So they let me go back to sleep. But the other time he had to come at noon. The time I called him in the morning, he had a barber shop appointment or something. So he called Vanjie. And God bless her, she got there just in time for us to go out for lunch. But they were good to me. They were kind to me. They were patient with me. And I'm not always pleasant, as you know.
Well, nobody's always pleasant.
What an awesome life. God is good to me. Like Layla and I can sing her church song together, real loud. Jesus loves me, this I know, 'cause the Bible tells me so. We sing it to each other over the phone sometimes. Sunday after church and after lunch. She's bored. Gabby will say, want to talk to your Nana? Okay. She was so quiet when she came. By the time she left, she sounded like Gabby when she was little. She's as bad as her Nana. You name a subject and she knows something about it. she told me she saw Robert's. Did you see her scar?
Maybe.
I think so. I think he had shorts on. Anyhow, she asked me where my owie was. I had a little scab here. So I told her about it. And she told me about her traumatic owie. One day, she was running with a glass. And it was an accident, but it broke. And she tried to clean up the mess before her daddy saw it, because her daddy hollers. And she got a piece of glass in her finger. But her mama rescued her and took the glass out. And it bleeded all the way down her finger. And her mom put a cold, wet wash rag on it and wiped off the blood and made her sit with her hand up like that. And when her hand got tired, her mom washed it off again, and she put that stingy stuff on, and then she put a Band-Aid on it. A little princess Band-Aid. And after that, one day she was looking on her fingers, and she couldn't find where the glass went in. It was on one of her fingers. She couldn't find that spot. But the drama and the big brown eyes when she talks to you. Gabby was that way, with the same big brown eyes. Oh my God. When she was smaller than Layla and bigger than Frankie, she was getting new teeth, back teeth. Diana called me and she said, "Can I drop Gabby off?" I said, "Sure." She said, "When do I have to come and get her?" I said, "Whenever, when you miss her. If she gets too homesick," I said, "we'll call you at noon." Not every day, but most days. That's a cute little thing. Wouldn't that be fun to drive through ditches? Anyhow, Gabby came with all her favorite toys and favorite nightgowns and night-night blanket, and she was there for almost 3 months. Anyhow, when Bob was having a good day, I'd help him get dressed. After breakfast, but before lunch, he'd take her down the hill over to the convenience store gas station and buy her a single dip of her favorite ice cream, and he would get a double dip of his favorite ice cream and a handful of napkins, and they'd walk home, her hanging onto one of his fingers, and her holding onto her ice cream. And they'd walk home, and they'd have to stop to wipe off ice cream once in a while. Well, there was a guy that went to school with my sister Vanjie in Wakan, and he worked there. His name was Shufflebine. And he looked just like his dad used to when I was a teenager. Good-looking guy. Anyhow, he worked there. And he'd been down and she'd show him what ice cream she wanted. Sometimes he'd lift her up to see the back ones. And she'd get her ice cream cone first. And then Grandpa would get his. Well, she fell in love with some turquoise-colored ice cream that had little hard circles of bubble gum in it. It's called bubblegum ice cream. She had most of her teeth. This is like Frankie's got most of his teeth. She loved this bubblegum ice cream. By the time she got home, she'd need a bath and her clothes changed. She loved this. When she went in, Grandpa said, "What kind of ice cream do you want, Gab?" "Hold me up, Papa." So Bob held her up so she could see the back ones. They were in big tubs. "I want bubble gum." And Bruce shuffled by and said, "I'm sorry, sweetie. We ran all out of bubble gum. You ate it all. Pick out a different kind. I got blueberry. I got green. I got yellow. I got pink. I got pink with cherries in it. I got the kind your grandpa likes with nuts in." He named off all the ice cream. And of course, chocolate and vanilla. I think 2 or 3 times. She took her feet. She stomped on the ground. She put her hands on her hips. And she said, "If I can't have bubble gum, I don't want nothing." And she went storming out of the store. Bob said it had to be a Monday because everyone was in town. And they saw him walk down Main Street and up the hill I lived on with a 2-scoop ice cream cone and a kid with no ice cream, pouting. He said, "I felt about this big." He said, "Everybody looked at me." He said, "A couple of guys said, 'Where's her ice cream?' He said, "They didn't have bubble gum," and he kept going. He was so embarrassed because it was a little town. And everybody knew all of us. And everybody knew Gabby. She was little. And he went down to Moe's to get gas a couple days later. And Lyle Moe said, "You filthy pig. Eating a 2-scoop ice cream cone in front of that little girl. How could you?" He just, And of course they had customers in there. He wouldn't have said nothing. But Lyle Moe could raise hell over nothing. And loud, you could hear him across the street. But if he hollered at you, everyone in town knew it. And all about it. And if they wanted to come back and see him later, they got all the details. He was the biggest gossip in town. He had that gas station on the corner by the river.
Yeah, McGregor was a fun town to spend summers.
What?
McGregor was a great town to spend summers at.
It was fun in the winter time, tobogganing down the driveway or the hill or the road or whatever the hell it was.
Go ice skating. Yep.
And then when we got real cold, we'd go out and by the cemetery, past the cemetery, to White Springs Restaurant. And there was 2 large sisters that ran that place. And I think if milk spilled on the floor and you tasted it, it would be delicious. They could cook like you wouldn't believe. Oh my God. And they both had, one of them lived there and one of them lived out in the country a couple miles. They both had huge gardens. And all summer long, they'd have fresh salads with fresh radishes and home canned pickles and little cucumbers and little carrots and little onion. Oh my God, could they cook? Oh, anything you wanted. Anything. And if they didn't have it, they'd go look at the calendar and they'd say, we're getting some steaks in on Thursday. I'll have you a 2-inch porterhouse then. And half price because I had to order it. You had to wait for it. Pies, cakes. They bake bread every day. And rolls and biscuits and pies. God, those ladies could cook. White Springs was called. Used to be a nightclub. And then it was a bar and a restaurant and a dance hall upstairs. I remember hitchhiking down to McGregor from Caledonia. To hear the Six Fat Dutchmen or someone like that, some old polka band. When I was Laura's age, I must have had 2 guardian angels on double duty. If it was Tuesday or Thursday, and I got the kids in bed and gave Mike a couple of cigarettes and Donald a couple of bucks, they'd stay home with the kids. Pat would be tending bar. And me and my thumb would go. One night we ended up in Winona. As long as there was music, I was out there dancing. And lots of times, I'd take an envelope, fold a piece of paper that said congratulations or best wishes, stick it in the envelope, and if somebody was having a wedding dance, you either paid at the door or you left them an envelope that they assumed had a wedding gift or money in it. Mine had a piece of paper that said, congratulations, no signature. But it was sealed, and they accepted it at the door. Used to hitchhike down to, was it Dreamland in Waterville? Dance hall down in the flat part. Spinner got rich in high school, especially if it rained. Him and his brother, he would take the tractor down from the other side of town, and his brother would bring the car with jumper cables and stuff in it. They always had a jack and a tire patch. Anybody that got stuck in the mud or the snow or was too drunk to drive, anybody that needed a jump start or a tow, they took care of them for a little cash. Mike was his brother.
I wonder how your cat got out earlier.
And
Sprinkle, but it feels good.
that's that one gray cloud.
Feels good.
Mike was about Brian's age, but he could drive the car. And
Too, buddy.
Spinner'd take the tractor and stay with it. Mike would open and unlock doors and trunks. Finders keepers. He'd almost always find a bottle or some beer in somebody's car. And then Richard would threaten to tell Dad on him. And if it was liquor, he'd give Richard the bottle. If it was beer, they'd split it, but it could have been 12, 14. Tom and Jerry were still in school when they moved. Teresa and Vanjie were going to high school in Waton when they moved to Waterville. So those kids are pretty damn young. And Richard was a year older than Sammy, but younger than Mike.
Great.
What, cat?
Yeah.
Hey, leave your claws to yourself.
Mine feels good though.
Well, I better shut up and go rinse out my mouth and drink some water. And no, you're a bad boy. You scared that little girl. Hey, you're a bad boy. You don't believe me.
Hey, no, I don't want hair on me. I'm sorry.
I think you just wanted to get on her lap.
Well, she was standing and I think he jumped up on her.
What?
She was standing and I think he jumped up on her.
Yeah.
I just want to sit on my rock.
But the other one was sitting.
She got scared.
I wonder if cats get confused, or any animals get confused.
About what?
When
Laura.
they see two of the same person.
Can you
Oh.
tell the twin girls apart?
If they have shorts on, I can.
One's got a birthmark.
Yeah.
Well, yesterday, whatever day it was, they not only had shorts outfits, but one had white sandals and one had see-through sandals. So I waited until the one with the see-through sandals called her sister Ziva.
They trick each other. They call each other the other name sometimes.
Oh,
Because when we had Jessica's thing, I asked them who they were, and then they would call each other something different. And I knew that that wasn't the right one. I was like, okay, I have no idea.
I usually call little kids honey or sweetie or Nama's boy or Nama's girl.
Yeah, half the time I forget their names anyway, or I call them something else.
I've called Robert probably 5 different things since I've been here. I call him Bob, I call him Josh. And he lets me. He usually don't say nothing. I realize it later when I called him the wrong name. Sweetheart works with him. When he was little, I used to sing, "You Are My Sunshine," and I'd call him my sunshine boy, or my sweetheart sunshine boy. And then one day he was in kindergarten, I think, or Cub Scout something, and I called him my sweet darling boy. My name is Robert. Okay. When he was little, he wouldn't answer if you called him Bobby or Butchie Boy or Bob Jr. My name is Robert. Okay. Diana had about 20 different nicknames, depending on what year it was.
Do you remember when I refused to answer anyone who didn't call me Kubi?
I think Jessica named you Kobe when you were tiny. And I almost had a heart attack one morning. you were crying and you were cold. Your feet were cold. And I cleaned you up, gave you a bottle, walked the floor, burped you, wrapped you in a blanket, and your feet would kick out of the blanket and they were still cold. So I did something you're not supposed to do. I laid on the couch, put my arm around you, tucked the blanket under you, and we both fell asleep. In the morning, Josh was walking the floor holding you. I went panicky. I said, "Where's the baby?" Josh says, "I got Kubi." I said, "Thank God, I thought she rolled out of bed." He said, "No. She was awake and you were asleep with your arm around her." Go. You were tiny. You still slept in the top part of the pack and play. That's how little you were.
Well, guess I never really grew up.
Well, when you were an infant and had to be picked up and changed and fed frequently, that was convenient. And when you got bigger, they put it down like a crib. But it had mattresses and blankets and stuff in. And you slept in that room. And Jessica and Joni slept in what your dad's bathroom. They had bunk beds in there. And when I was here, I slept on the couch. And sometimes when I wasn't here, Jessica and Joni would take your crib in the bedroom with them. Just move the furniture around. But that was their bedroom. You were such a good baby. Oh my God. The only time we'd hear you is if you were wet up to your neck. And then you'd go, I never heard you do that half-hour beller. When a kid starts out with, and a half hour later they're, and there's nothing wrong with them. Danielle was like that. Stubborn. Oh my God. I saw her bite the tip off of a tooth after a pacifier when she only had 2.5 teeth. Her second tooth on the bottom didn't come in yet. She had 2 on top and a half of one on the bottom. That's how stubborn that kid was. And if she pooped in her pants and wasn't done, and you wanted to clean her up, she would lay on the floor, roll around in it, kick, scream, until finally she'd be quiet. And a little while later, she'd go, "I done now."
Ugh.
Sometimes you'd have to wash her hair, besides give her a bath. Clean up the mess. And if something was loose, clean up the floor too. And then she wanted it off right now. She didn't want to be in it. But she didn't want you to to clean her up until she was done. And of all the kids, Jonah and Demetria were the easiest kids of all the kids, all my kids. They were the easiest two to potty train. Because Jonah wanted to do what Josh did. So he learned how to do that pretty fast. And sometimes the poor little guy would stand up and aim and pee all over the front of the toilet because he was so short. But he was trying. And your mother was patient with him. And Demetria came to Texas in diapers, pull-ups at night. And if I put on sandals, she wanted sandals. If I put on a skirt, she wanted a skirt. If I had a cup of coffee, she wanted a cup of coffee. Anything I did, she wanted to do. So she'd come in the bathroom behind me and watch me. Gabby and Danielle can do that, yeah. So can you if you wanna. The toilet's too big, I'll fall in. So I got, I think it's 5-quart plastic bucket with a plastic lid and a handle full of ice cream. And when the ice cream was all gone, I got this brainstorm. Cut a hole in the middle. Give it to Demi. Give her a little, half a roll of toilet paper. Set her up in the bathroom. So I'd go in and I'd say, put your panties down and sit down. I gotta go potty. You try. Sometimes she'd go and sometimes she wouldn't. When she went pee and it landed in the bucket, I had a Band-Aid box. Years ago, Band-Aid boxes were like smoking tobacco boxes. They were little, white, rectangular, shaped like a bandage box, but with a lid that flipped open and closed, made out of metal. When she went pee, she got a penny. When she did the big job, she got a big money. She got a nickel. She'd walk around the house shaking it. When she started dropping it, it was getting heavy. I'd say, well, let's count your money. We might get up to 30 cents, 26 cents. Anyhow, we'd count it. We'd put in a little leather coin purse she got to carry. And we'd go to the dollar store. And we'd look at all the big girl panties. And then finally we'd narrow it down to her size. And she'd feel them. And if they were, God bless you.
Oh, thank you.
If, once more. If they were acrylic or nylon or silky feeling, that's the kind Gabby wore. So we'd pick out a pair of them. Cinderella or Snow White or Sleeping Beauty or somebody on them. And she'd put the coin purse on the counter and I'd pay for them and dump the coin purse in my purse and hand her the empty coin purse. Maybe leave a penny or two in it for next time. And she found one pair she liked. Didn't happen often. Usually she was between these or those. So we'd get 2-3 pair of silky underpants. She'd carry the bag home. And when we got home, we'd take off the labels and I'd rinse them out, put them on snappy clothespins on a hanger in my shower rod. And after they got dry, she could wear them. But She couldn't pee in them. She had a pee, she had to take them off. So one day, she's outside. She comes in. She's holding her wet underpants. I said, what happened, Demi? Did you have an accident? No. I said, what happened? Somebody peed in my pants. I said, oh, who was it? Oh, no, I didn't see nobody. She could lie with a straight face. I think she still can. But when I took her home, I stayed for the weekend or a few days, whatever. I stayed a while. And after we were there a while, we had a snack. And Demi said, excuse me. She went in the bathroom and I said to Diana, follow her. Diana came out of the bathroom. She says, oh my God, she can go in the toilet. I said, yeah. And she can wipe herself pretty clean. But sometimes she has a hard time flushing. She said, oh my God, Ma, how'd you do that? I'm the Nama, I can do what I wanna. That's been my excuse for 36 years. Little Gabby will be 37 in October.
I know, time just flies.
What?
Time just flies.
Yeah. She was born a couple of hours before your daddy's 21st birthday. And he picked me up at work around midnight at the hospital. And by the time he helped me on the train, and he told the conductor, push her off when you get to Champaign, I was so drunk I couldn't see my feet. I don't think the train came until like 3 o'clock or something. And got in Champaign in the morning. And Danny picked me up and he said, Ma, are you okay? I said, I'm drunk as a billy goat. He said, you want to go to the hospital and see Gabby and the baby, or you want to go home and take a nap? I said, well, stick close to me. I want to see Gabby and the baby. And then I want a nap, a long nap. He was so good to me.
Diana and the baby.
What?
Not Gabby and the baby, Diana and the baby.
Oh, what did I say?
Gabby and the baby.
I do, I'm sorry, I do that all the time.
That's all right.
There's holes in my sponge. Stuff falls in the holes.
Still got a lot of great memories.
What?
You still have a lot of great memories.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. I remember Kenny is 7.5 years younger than I am. My great-grandma, where we lived at her house, was very sick by then. She was in bed. And my 2 aunts, Harold's 2 sisters, came up from Chicago to see Ma and the new baby and visit Grandma, their grandma. And when Ma brought Kenny home from the hospital, the aunts were already in the house. And like I said, Grandma was really sick. And Pat and I are standing there waiting to hold the baby. Pat got Bridget, who was premature and had to have a lot of care when she was tiny, and colicky besides. And we're standing there like baby birds with our hands up. Both of us, can I hold the baby? Can I hold the baby? I get to hold him first. Can I hold the baby? Ma looked at Pat, and she had Bridget on her hip. My hands were empty. 7.5 years old. She hands me Kenny Joe, a newborn infant, not a week old yet. And she said, "Here, you can have this one, Kate. It's just another damned old boy." My Aunt May threw a fit. My Aunt Marilyn said, "It's Vanjie. Don't mean nothing." But my Aunt May, who I only saw a couple times when I was a little kid, I hardly knew her. She threw such a fit that Grandma McKenna had to break it up and take her to town, buy her a beer and settle her down. But oh, there's a bee above you.
Hello. Please don't.
That's good.
Bless you.
Well, that worked. You said please go and he flew away.
No.
Nope, there he is again. Please go.
Hi. Hi there. Okay.
I think there's some white cider vinegar part of a bottle here. The next time you shampoo your hair, after the shampoo and cream rinse are rinsed out, put about a tablespoon of vinegar in the bottom of a glass like that Snoopy one, and do a final rinse with your hair. And bugs and bees and birds won't bother you, because it won't smell good. If you got apple blossom in there, they'll come right after you. But it's like in the color of your hair.
I think it's my lavender scented shampoo.
Yeah, that could be it. Thinks you're a flower.
Was that phone call around 10:30?
Probably.
That was to know that my extended warranty on my 2004 Buick is about to expire. I haven't driven that car for 5 years. Or close to it.
Get some food because I'm kind of hungry.
I'm a little hungry too. Do you want me to grab you something to eat?